Hey everyone, I think it's about time to start some seed sowing. So join along and learn the basics of using Coco Coir as I start next season's annuals and perennials under grow lights and show you the results. This is the first time I'm starting all my seeds for the next year in Coco Coir, so I'm going to document the whole process and show you my results so you can see if you want to try this yourself. And you can learn from my mistakes too. This is going to be a longer video, but it will go through several stages to show the growth from seed to small plant in a soilless medium. Coco Coir is this wonderful substrate that is a byproduct of coconut husk tissue. You will also hear me switch between calling it coir and choir because I called it choir once and it's hard to fix that once it's ingrained in your brain. But whatever you call it, the coconut has been used for many different purposes long before commercial gardening came along. The Field Museum in Chicago has a botany collection, and in that collection they show how a coconut husk can be broken down and processed into various forms, including the natural fiber, baled coir, combed coir, which looks pretty snazzy, coir yarn, coconut rope, and mats made out of coir. Seeing it presented in this way is a good reminder that Coco Coir is not soil, but rather simply the coconut husk tissue. Because coir can come in many different forms for different uses, you'll want to purchase Coco Coir from a hydroponic source that has been processed and prepared for horticultural use. Look for coir that has been pre-buffered and rinsed of salts. Pre-buffering will help with calcium and magnesium deficiencies, but you may still need a supplement called CalMag depending on the needs of your plants. For today's purposes, we're going to be using high pith coir, which is the most similar to the structure of conventional soil. So when you receive your coir, it probably will be in a dehydrated brick. You can sort of break off pieces, which is what I've tried before, but I find it most helpful to rehydrate the full brick by placing it in a container and letting it absorb water slowly. So here are a few reasons why you may want to try Coco Coir. Coir is biodegradable and, importantly, renewable as compared to peat. I have more on that later. It is highly absorbent of water and doesn't become hydrophobic like peat. It helps with root aeration. Coco Coir can also be used more than once, as nutrients aren't depleted because it contains very little, if any, already. So here's my environmental side note from a layperson who just understands this as a gardener. I know there's a lot of environmental concerns about using peat and the detrimental effects on peatlands, so I've shifted to using Coco Coir personally. While peat is renewable, we're talking in the hundreds or thousands of years, so I find it helpful to think of it as a non-renewable resource. But here Reasonable James is coming to tell you that you must also reconcile the fact that a lot of water is used to rinse the coir and prepare it for the consumer, as well as shipping, packaging, and more. So basically, unless you are making your own compost, there is no perfect solution, so you will have to educate yourself and weigh your options. Even if the environmental impacts are comparable, coir has been a more effective seed growing medium for me, which means something. Today I will also be mixing in some coarse perlite for additional drainage because honestly, you can never have enough perlite. Now let's pick out our seeds, which is always my favorite part. All right, everybody, so I have all my supplies right here ready to start the seeding process. So I have my prepared Coco Coir with a little bit of perlite mixed in. I have my seedling trays right here, seedling trays, as well as some like 4-inch pots, depending on the needs of the seeds. I have, of course, the seeds, which are essential to the process. On top of that, you really have to plan to have a fertilizer that you like and that you're comfortable with because Coco Coir does not inherently have any nutrients in it. So this is like a very important, essential part. It's not like it's optional. You really have to have a fertilizer for Coco Coir. So I'm going to be using Baetanica's Pure Blend Pro Grow. It's derived from fish meal, composted seabird guano, kelp, rock phosphate, potassium carbonate, magnesium carbonate, and calcium carbonate. So that's really helpful. And of course, I always use this, which is liquid seaweed. So that's why I have a gigantic jug of it right here. So liquid seaweed is really helpful to providing trace nutrients. So this is from Blue Planet Nutrients, and it says it provides over 60 trace elements, amino acids, enzymes, carbohydrates, readily available micronutrients. So it's, you don't really use it for the NPK, which is 0.3, 0.2, and 1. You use it for the micronutrients, which are really helpful, especially during the early stages of seedling growth. So let's start the process. So first up is Blue Cap Sea Holly. So I've never grown this before, but I'm in love with blue flowers in general, so this is going to be really nice. This is a perennial, so it will be coming back time and time again. Great thing about this type of cell pack is that the actual tray is clear, so you can see the development of roots through the plastic, which is really nice. And then when you put it in the drainage tray, the roots are concealed, which won't harm the development of those roots. Next up is a Blue Glow Globe Thistle. You're gonna see a trend with blue flowers with what I picked. It was unintentional, but now I am all about it. This is my first time growing globe thistle. They are perennial, and the instructions say to simply press the seed into the soil. I get a lot of specific germination questions, but honestly, the best advice is to read the labels closely because you'll find very important advice on how to trigger germination. Next up was torch lily, otherwise known as Kniphofia or red hot poker. I've grown these before and I enjoy the blooms a lot, and the foliage is also really cool. I've seen them at the Huntington Gardens and I was really impressed by them, so that's kind of what made me want to try growing them from seed. Next up is another blue flower, of course, this time blue bouquet Veronica. So these seeds, as you can tell, are a little different. They came as pelleted seeds, which simply means that the seed has been coated with a substance to make them easier to sow them. It usually results in more even distribution, and it's just a little easier to handle the seeds. The directions say they bloom the first year if started early, so I am hopeful. Next up is Bellomosa delphinium. These are wonderful for that kind of cottage garden look that I tend to like a lot. Again, these are blue flowers, so clearly my mind was stuck on blue when I was ordering. These are semi-perennial for me, not because of harsh winters, but because of harsh summers. Now, snapdragons are always essential. Chantilly snapdragons are excellent cut flowers and I highly recommend them. The seeds are tiny, so try your best to carefully sow them so you don't end up with one cell full of snapdragons and the rest empty. Rudbeckia maxima, or great coneflower. This is a large species of Rudbeckia or black-eyed Susan. They have a sort of cabbage-like leaf to them, and they produce flower stalks that are greater than 6 feet tall. They're just really nice structure in the garden. They're also a little difficult to trigger germination in my experience in the past, so we'll see how these go. Pale purple coneflower, otherwise known as Echinacea pallida. This will be my first time growing this species, although I have grown many Echinacea in the past. These are wonderful if you're going for a prairie garden, and like Rudbeckia maxima, they are native to the United States. And finally, Bush's coneflower, otherwise known as Echinacea paradoxa. This is the only native species of Echinacea to have yellow flowers, which is what I think the species name refers to, a paradox. Again, these are native to the United States. Now let's head to the grow tent. The great thing about having a grow tent is that you get to control the environment entirely. It is a great system if you need to start seeds early, especially if you have a short season. I also personally have higher success with seeding indoors in a consistent environment. I'll put a link to the one I have in the description. There are smaller ones and larger ones depending on your needs. I was sent this grow light to try from the lovely people at Spiderfarmer, so I will be testing it out in these videos. I'm going to be giving my honest opinion, so here we go. I was familiar with the Samsung LEDs, which this grow light uses, and have used them in the past to great success, so I knew this was going to be a good light. But the great part about this one from Spiderfarmer is that it came pretty much assembled, including the Meanwell driver. I didn't have to do any soldering, as I've had to do with other lights. It also has a dimmer, and as I'm putting this video together now, and I've used it for a while, I'm very happy with the quality and performance. Basically, they've removed the intimidation of some of these Samsung LED grow lights to new indoor growers. So let's take this grow light for a spin.
Check it.
Germination was about a week on most of the seeds. Of course, starting seeds in Coco Coir can present issues, and I was not immune to that. It was clear that there were two problems emerging. Growth was yellowing, which told me I needed to increase the nutrients from the seedling stage. I reverted to normal dosing instead of the half dose, and the problem started to correct itself.
Check it.
Second problem was increased mold on the surface of the coir. I believe this happened to me because my fan, which was spinning, was actually not blowing air. I opened the fan, cleaned and fixed the blades, and it started working again. I also began using a second fan and a dehumidifier, and the mold problem started to clear up. I ended up with 3 Rudbeckia maxima, and I was pretty grateful for that actually. I haven't had a ton of luck germinating them, and I only needed a few of the plants anyway because they're quite large. I didn't document the Veronica all that much because it was slow, so between these shots was several weeks. And finally, the last, Echinacea paradoxa's germination did not do that well inside the grow tent. This is probably a seed that needs some outdoor conditions to trigger germination. A few weeks later, and many of the seedlings are ready for their first transplant. It's clear to see these plants remained happy and healthy growing in this soilless medium. Repotting them at the right time is important to keeping the momentum of the plant growth. Transplant too late and they'll suffer stunted growth. Transplant too early and they may not survive the shock. So look for healthy roots emerging from the drainage holes of the cell packs. Check out them healthy roots. I made so much Coco Coir earlier that I have enough to replant all these seedlings and then some. I don't show it here, but I did go back and thin the seedlings by beheading the weakest plant at the soil line. Doing it that way allowed me to not disturb any of the roots. This is a good time to do that. So here's the final takeaway. If you want proof that starting your seeds indoors with grow lights and Coco Coir is worth the effort, here's the best example I have. On the left is a Rudbeckia maxima that was sown in a pot outdoors on August 14th with conventional soil. That makes it 17 weeks old. On the right is a Rudbeckia maxima that was sown in Coco Coir on November 1st and grown indoors with a grow light. That makes it 6 weeks old. 17 weeks versus 6 weeks. The plant in a more controlled environment has already lapped the other, and it was started only 6 weeks ago. Well, that has been my long introduction to seed growing in Coco Coir. I didn't mean to make such a long video, but by the time I started to edit the video, I had already documented a lot of growth and I couldn't resist sharing with you all what I had learned along the way. For the amount of money I spent on my seeds for the year, I now have a good collection of starter plants that really only took about a month or so to create. If you have the patience for seed growing, you can create a lot of plants for very little money. You also get a better understanding of how to grow these plants because you are along with them at every stage of their growth. Thank you for watching today's video, and if you got to this point and you don't start some seeds after watching this video, then I don't know what you're doing with your life. Until then, I'll see you in the next one.